Okay, guys, welcome back. This is another solo episode, episode 110. Just got back from Thanksgiving break. Drove a couple hours back to my hometown, chilled with the family. And my family, we basically just play games, eat, and chill, and go to the movies. Saw Gladiator 2, give it a 6 out of 10. But yeah, it was awesome. I don't go back to my hometown very often. It's this weird little frozen bubble in time, and there's a lot of aspects of my hometown that I don't enjoy. And it's not trauma or anything. I just don't love, I don't know, small towns. Like, they're quaint and they're fun to drive through and visit, and they're cute and they're simple and they're quiet. But there's some negative to that too, and there's some old school thinking, and there's some lack of progression, and there's just a lot of things that go into that. But mostly, yeah, most of my people are not down there anymore. One of my best friends got married and moved back there, so I try to see him anytime I'm down. And then just my parents and my grandma is pretty much it. I have an aunt, a couple cousins that live down there, and I run into some old friends. Sometimes I run into a buddy at the movie theater, but for the most part, when I go home, I just like see my parents and my grandma and dip. But I really enjoyed it, this visit, and Thanksgiving for me is not about stuffing and dry turkey and gross beets. It's just about family. I wish it was more about gratitude. My family doesn't super get into like, hey, let's talk about what we're grateful for and let's go around the table. That's not really our tradition. Although we've done it before in the past, it's not a staple. And I love talking about gratitude and focusing on what we're grateful for. And I did the days leading up, but I don't know that this Thanksgiving felt like an especially like day full of gratitude. Or like that was the theme. It was just more about family and being together. And in that I was very grateful. But anyway, yeah, what's been good since the last solo episode? Month and a half ago. Not much. Life is good. I've been really in just a specific state of felicity that that feeling comes and goes, and I've talked about this a lot, but when there is happiness, when there is joy in your life, you just have to be grateful, and you can't overthink it and worry about when it might leave. You have to just hold on and enjoy the ride. Like, if you're on a roller coaster and you're obsessing the whole time with, when is this going to stop? And when it stops, are we going to go on another ride? Are we going to wait in line? Are we going to get a corn dog? Is this going to be my favorite ride ever? Is this ride going to be overrated? Is it going to jerk my neck around? Is it going to get me nauseated? Is it going to be fun? If you don't just, like on a roller coaster, you need to just enjoy the ride. Enjoy it for what it is. It doesn't last long, and who knows what's going to happen after it. And that's kind of how I view happiness and joy. And yeah, I've been blessed the last month or so to just be a little bit out of my head, out of my feelings a little bit. Not out of my feelings. I'm never really out of my feelings, but yeah, had some good breaks, had some beautiful people enter my life, had a lot of love, and so I'm holding on to that, and I'm grateful. So yeah, today we're going to be doing mostly Q&A. Had a lot of questions come in, and I want to start with saying, unfortunately, I can't get to all of them, And a lot of them are a little bit redundant. So if I didn't answer your question, I just couldn't get to it, or there's a lot of questions that are pretty darn similar. One person will ask, how do you deal with a heartbreak? And the other person will say, walk me through getting over a breakup. And, it's like those are essentially the same questions. And so I often will go with the one that I like how it's worded a little bit better, or something that maybe I haven't explored before. But I'll tell you what, the theme of these questions was the old heart. So, and I don't want people to think that I think I'm an expert. I'm not. I've just, had my share of heartbreak, and I've had my many, many shares of relationships and experiences with dating, and not just romantic, relationships in general have always been important to me and been on my mind, and something I strive to progress in. And so, yeah, I don't know that I'm an expert. I don't know that my advice will save anyone or help anyone, but I think if nothing else, it's helpful for people to realize they're not alone, and realize that their questions are pretty darn universal and pretty common. And yeah, if it worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. But yeah, I don't want to come across as like, this is what you do to be happy. This is what you do to mend a broken heart. This is what you do to get over this, to transcend this. Like, these are just my thoughts. These are my feelings. And I worded this when I threw this Q&A on my Instagram. I said, I said a few lines, and then I said, and these are the soul fracturing questions, or what I want to hear. And so people delivered. A lot of these are, man, they dip into the soul, and they make you think, and they make you hurt a little bit. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to dive in and see what we can figure out. And it's funny, these solo episodes have a special aura about them, and they can be kind of heavy, and they can kind of weigh on me. And so, but I don't like to, I went through the questions really quickly to see which ones I wanted to answer, but I didn't spend really much time like coming up with answers or writing them down or deciding what to say. And so hopefully these are pretty authentic responses. So let's get into it. The first one is, how do you pray when situations feel hopeless or bigger than you? I pray the same way. I think part of the reason you pray is because you're hopeless, or at least you feel hopeless. There's a very fine line between being hopeless and feeling hopeless. And I don't know that we ever really know, because the thing about hope is you don't really know when it's going to come around the corner and gift you and wrap its arms around you and help you. And so a lot of times it feels like I'm hopeless, but there is hope. So I try not to get too caught up in the semantics of, am I hopeless or do I just feel hopeless? But to just accept the fact that, hey, in this moment I feel hopeless, and I'm going to pray out in desperation. And, my problem is bigger than me. And a lot of that is just surrendering and, yeah, being open to the fact that whether I'm hopeless or not, doesn't really matter. I need help, And so as far as how do I pray, I don't know that my approach to the prayer is any different, because every day there are things that I feel a little hopeless about. It's just, sometimes the desperation is bigger, and that prayer becomes more of a cry out. It becomes more of, it feels like a final act like a true act of desperation, because you don't have any other resource, you don't have any other way of communicating this pain. And so I think God doesn't care how you word things, he cares that you word them. I don't think he cares, the order of your words or when you say them. He just wants to hear them. And that doesn't mean your prayers are going to be answered how you'd like or when you'd like. But and that's my belief. I believe that God's up there and he's listening. And if you don't believe that, that's fine. You have hope in other things and you have belief in other things. But next question is, how do you work internally on things that messed up your previous relationships? That's a good question. I think it is important after a breakup, when the dust is settled and, your heart has calmed down a little bit and you can see straight and the fog is lifted at least a little bit. I do think it's important to ask yourself, where did we go wrong? But also, where did I go wrong? It's so easy and it's such a human instinct when you get rejected or heartbroken or jettisoned aside to want to blame and want to cast, dispersions on the other person. But I don't know how healthy that is. Sometimes, the person is deeply at fault and merits that blame and merits these new boundaries and these new feelings of distance. But sometimes it just didn't work. And sometimes you're to blame. And sometimes it's really unclear. And I think for myself, it's often been a little unclear because it hasn't been like this dramatic, chaotic, toxic end. It just ended. One person's feelings changed, or we came to an emotional impasse. And so, yeah, you do have to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what did mess up our relationship? Maybe that's not the right word, but what caused us to end? What caused us to not be compatible? And the truth is, sometimes you are compatible, but the desire isn't there for one person, and that sucks. But yeah, I think it's really important to look inward and say, did I give my all in this relationship? Did I love as hard as I could? Did I treat this person like someone that I loved more than anything? Did I love them more than I love myself? Was I selfish? Was I needy? Was I over dependent on them? These are important questions, and maybe your relationship was more complicated than that or less complicated, but I do think some analysis and some introspection is helpful and can help you move on in the process too, because sometimes you realize, well, yeah, I didn't give my all, but it's because I didn't want us to end up together. I didn't see it happening. And yeah, maybe I stuck around for too long because it was easy and because I enjoyed, someone loving me. I enjoyed being with somebody. I enjoyed having someone to go see movies with and to talk to about work and my friends. And, a lot of times, and for a lot of people, it's easier to be in a relationship, even if it's not especially healthy or if it's not really going anywhere. And so maybe nothing really terrible happened, but maybe you should look in the mirror and ask yourself, did I stay in this too long? Was I honest with myself the whole time, or just the last 2 days where I decided to end it? Yeah, these are good questions to ask. What's been your experience with what you've gone through and how it's given glory to God? It's an interesting question. I think my personal belief that's wrapped up in my, you know, my morality and my religious beliefs and the doctrine that I subscribe to, my belief is that all of my suffering and all the things I have to go through will ultimately be for my benefit in some way or another, in this life or another. I don't know how, I don't know all the details, but I believe that. And so I guess the simple answer is I believe everything I've had to endure and everything that I will endure, if I do it, you can't always do it with a good attitude, but if I can find purpose in my suffering and find joy in the crucible of life, then that in and of itself will glorify God in my belief, you know? And even if your belief system, your ethos does not involve God, I think your suffering and your pain and your trials and your tribulations, they can have meaning, and they should have meaning. And whether you tie that back to divinity or you tie that back to dogma that is important to you, it's important to me, but I don't know that it needs to be that way for everybody. But I do think purpose and joy and meaning needs to be found in suffering and the things you go through, or else life is just pain and life is just tragic, and you should avoid anything that causes you pain. If that's if that's the conclusion, then you should avoid pain at all costs and seek the opposite. But I think that leads to nihilism and hedonism and unhappiness. But that's just my opinion. How do you cut it off with someone when you deeply love them but know the relationship will fail? I think I've gone through this before, and it's really hard. And that phrasing, cut it off, it's almost literal. Like, when you cut something, it snaps back and it goes away and it's changed forever. And it's hard because sometimes you love someone deeply, like to the very center of your heart. Your heart beats for that person. But there's something happening in the relationship that makes it somewhat doomed, and maybe that's just your personality types ultimately don't match very well. Maybe it's however much you love them, they love you, but significantly less. And because that love is lessened and not as strong, they aren't going to give as much. They're not going to sacrifice as much. And so it will always be a little bit of a one-sided relationship. And so, there's myriad reasons why a good thing can sort of feel doomed to fail. And there's some mysteries to human interest and desire. It's like, why there's been girls I've dated that I've wanted to love so bad and I've liked very strongly, and I've felt like I've given it a chance, but there comes a time when you can feel in your heart that you don't love this person, that you just like them, and you might like them a lot. And if you do that for a couple of years, you might even convince yourself that you love them. But I don't know. There's some people, for some reason, they light your soul on fire. And of course you have to work to keep that fire aflame, but I can't explain why other people don't do it for you, because sometimes you work just as hard and you sacrifice just as much, but some biochemical cosmic enigma makes it so it's there with one person and it's not with the other. And so, how do you cut it off with that person? I think the answer is early self-honesty. I think it's difficult for anybody to be self-honest, but in a relationship, especially when your heart's on the line and you're extra vulnerable, it's difficult to be completely honest about your feelings. But if you make a habit of doing that from the beginning, as soon as something shifts a little bit, it becomes apparent, and you're honest with yourself and you're honest with your partner. And so I think where this gets really murky is when you haven't been honest with yourself for a long time, and now it's become too much and it's flowed over, and now you need to cut it off. That's really hard, because you've sort of, drug this person along without them realizing that you're not really in love with them. And so it's extra painful. And no matter the time, breaking up with somebody that you really care about is very, very difficult. And I think the appropriate way to do it is to give them the opportunity to dive as deep as they want, ask as many questions as they want. But, sometimes people don't want to do that, and that's more painful. So I think it's appropriate to say, like, hey, listen. And whether this is, depending on how long you've been together, I think it merits an in-person conversation. But sometimes people don't even want that. It's too painful. It's too real. And so, whether it's text, phone call, in person, I think you need to say, like, this is how I feel. These are the reasons why. If you're feeling apologetic, say, I'm sorry. If you really love the person, you probably do feel some compunction, but you don't need to be sorry for how you feel, but it does soften the blow a little bit, So, these are the reasons why. And if you don't say, I don't need anything else. If that's all you want to hear, that's fine. I'll leave you alone. But if you want to know, if you want to dig into why I feel this way, if you want the hard conversations, I'm willing to do that for you because I care about you. And more often than not, people, they don't want to hear those things. They can't handle that conversation. But I do think it's really an act of grace to allow them that opportunity. This question will fracture the soul. What part of you do you find the most challenging to love? I need to think about this. Self-love is a curious endeavor. It's just always changing, but I don't know. I think anytime that I feel less than, that I feel unworthy, or I feel like just a low version of myself, is when I'm failing at some task or failing at some pursuit. And it's easy to think, well, if I was excelling at this, if I was doing well, if I wasn't failing, then I would be a better version of myself. I would be happier. I would be more fulfilled. And I think self-love is an ever-evolving journey that you have to just be vigilant about, and you have to be on top of. And so when intrusive thoughts creep in and tell you that you're not very smart, that you're not as attractive as you'd like to be, when your thoughts tell you that people would be happier if you weren't around, they would be more fulfilled if you weren't around, when your thoughts tell you that no one, people are nice and people are sweet, but no one really cares about you. That's what the intrusive thoughts, they say, and you have to realize that they are laced with poison and they're just not true, And I'll tell you what, you want to improve your self-love, you want to love yourself better, you start to love people a little bit more, and you start to pay attention to people a little bit more and their needs, and I think it's weird, but I feel like the love is contagious. The love you feel for somebody else, sometimes it opens chambers of your hearts and allows you to love yourself even more. When you find people that are, there's a certain kind of person that when you fall in love with and when they enter your life, you start to realize how beautiful you are. And you start to realize this person is so special and so unique and powerful and charming and delightful for no reason, seemingly like without weaknesses, seemingly without end to their gifts, right? When these types of people enter your life, and that's a romanticization a little bit of how they actually are, of course. But when they enter your life, because they're so wonderful, you realize, well, if they love me, I guess I got to take their word. Like, somebody that wonderful wouldn't waste time on someone unless they brought something to the table, unless they were also wonderful. And so, yeah, I think love, when it comes into your life with the right kind of person, it can reflect and can open your heart to love yourself. And if that's not true love, like, I'm not sure it exists. How can we live as if today or tomorrow is our last day, and what keeps us from doing so? That's a really good question. I think what keeps us from doing so is just we're very myopic people, and it's hard to focus on anything but what we're currently going through. And I think most of us, we don't know, but it in our heads we're like, yeah, this might be our last day, but it's probably not. So I'm not gonna carpe diem. I'm gonna go to McDonald's and get a double cheeseburger and go home and watch Hulu because I'm tired. I can seize the day another freaking day, and it's hard to get a full sense of the fragility of life and how quickly it evanesces. And yeah, certain moments in our life kind of jerk us out of that and make us want to seize the day and make us want to accomplish more and be more loving and realize what's important, but we will quickly revert to our default setting that is a little more selfish, a little more lazy, a little more prone to procrastinate, and I wish it could be different, but I do think as I've gotten older, I've realized how limited things are and how quickly things go by and fade. And so I hope as I get older, I won't live with regrets, and I won't live wishing that I had, seized my days more. But there will certainly be days like that because that's just how life is. But I think the best way to practice that and to try to be like, okay, how can I have this attitude all the time instead of just bursts of it when something tragic happens or when I have a near death encounter. Like I want to just feel like this all the time and have this passion for life and this zeal and this need to do good things and to experience new phenomena. Like, how do I always have that? I think the answer is just being present, you know? I think when you're way too focused on how much money you're going to make and what's going to be the next house you purchase and what's going to be the next car you lease and what's going to be the next vacation you go on. And it's okay to plan and it's okay to aspire, but I think sometimes that becomes our whole world and we don't focus on the now and we don't appreciate our freaking memories. We don't feel the beauty around us. We don't feel how impactful little tiny moments are. We don't see the core memories that are just completely surrounding us, this last weekend at Thanksgiving, the majority of my time, I said, with my family, we game and we eat and we chill, right? But I have 6 nieces and nephews, and 3 of them were there. My other sister was in Texas, but most of my time and what I'll remember from this Thanksgiving was playing with my nieces and nephews that are like 8, 4, and 0, 6 months old. And I tried to do that in a really present way and tried to play with them in new ways and play games and make believe and wrestle and just do fun little things with them in new ways, not only for their benefit but for mine as well, so I can remember them, because these kids tend to love their parents and their uncles and their aunts and their grandparents so much they'll you can kind of do the bare minimum and they'll still love you and they'll still want to play with you and they'll still want to see you. But I don't know. I don't want to be the uncle. I don't want to be the dad that gives those kids just the bare minimum. I want to give them everything I have, And sometimes you need a break and you need to look at your phone and you don't want to go play some pretend game for 2 hours. You want to frickin' watch a show. But so you can't give your max at all times. But yeah, I wanted to give them everything this weekend, and I felt like for the most part I did, and it was so fun. And I don't even know where I'm going with this thought. Why do we crave to be loved so bad? I think that's the essence of life, is to be loved and to love. And so I think it's a pretty darn normal craving. We crave the love of a mother, we crave the love of a father, and those who didn't get that the way they should have and the way they deserved, they'll crave it for the rest of their lives. And a lot of people will act out that craving in unhealthy ways because it hasn't been processed and understood and dealt with properly. But yeah, like, why do I crave to be in a loving relationship right now? And I had wonderful parents that didn't leave me with issues and leave me craving attention and validation from the opposite sex, or a mother figure. So why do I crave it so much? It's like, I feel like that's why we're here. We're here to love. We're here to, share our light with people. And if you have light, you know it. You might not want to admit it or say it out loud, but if you have light, you know that you have light. And I think you're more acute to seeing others that have light. And so you want that light, you know? So it's a beautiful question, but to me it's almost answers itself. It's like, why do we crave to be loved so bad? Because we crave it. We just do. It's something that, it just adds flavor to life. It adds color to life. And it doesn't mean if you're not in a loving relationship that your life is fully dull and gray and meaningless. You can have so much purpose in your life without, a loving romantic relationship. But without a loving relationship in general, like, I don't see how you're not going to be depressed. If you don't have a loving relationship somewhere, you're going to be depressed. These questions, they all feel very related, but I love these. Do you think you put your fullness, do you think you put your full love and devotion when you're in a romantic relationship? And, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think in the right relationships I do, but I think, in the early stages when you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to gauge the other person's interest and your own interest and see how compatible you are, and it feels like there's a click and a connection, but you're not sure how strong. Sometimes you don't give your all, and I think that's okay, because you're kind of trying to protect yourself and maybe even protect the other person. You don't want to go all in immediately, because then if you break up, it's even harder. And then sometimes you decide to not break up because it's so hard, right? So I do think once I've gotten past that stage of questioning and doubt, I'm all in. Like, I'll give you everything, And there are things that I don't want to give. I don't want to compromise. I've been single a long time. I have my habits. I have my ways. I have my opinions. But when the right person sort of waltzes into your life, everything changes, And it doesn't mean you give up your belief system, you give up what's most important to you, but the trivial things that you've held close to your heart, I think, can be dashed away. And I think that can be a beautiful thing. And I think that's how you grow. And so it's a good question to ask yourself, have you given your full love and your full devotion in a romantic relationship? And I think I've come pretty darn close, but I think there's more to give still. And I think the next relationship, and hopefully the final relationship, the one that ends in marriage and family and all the things I want, hopefully that's the one that I can say, I've given my absolute, the fullness of my love has been given. And maybe that'll take years or decades to sort of self-realize, but I'm excited for that opportunity even. Okay, why is it so hard for men, freaking men, Why is it so hard for men to go to therapy or admit they have a porn addiction? Well, the big guns. I don't want to speak for all men. I do think the beautiful thing is, in recent years, therapy has become way less taboo and way less, not taboo, just stigmatized and viewed as something you do if you're weak. I know I have a lot of homies that are in therapy, and within those friend groups, like nobody gives them flack. Like I think most people agree that it's a good thing. I do think I still know some people that are in therapy that seem to just always have problems, and they seem to perpetuate their own problems. But just because you go to a therapist doesn't mean you're doing the work, and or that your therapist is brilliant and right for you. So but yeah, why is it so hard for men especially to go to therapy or admit they have a porn addiction? Because we're prideful. We are a prideful bunch. And what does that say about you if you admit that porn or anything else, if you admit that you have an addiction, you're admitting, you've succumbed to something, you've been overtaken by something, you know. In recovery programs, they say they're powerless to this thing. And so a lot of guys, they thrive off of power. They thrive off of being in control. And so to admit they're out of control, to admit that they are powerless over something, a substance, videos and images, like that they're powerless over their own eyeballs, like it takes a lot. It takes a lot of humility. And so I think you gotta ask, like, if your guy isn't humble in other areas of his life, isn't open and vulnerable and willing to admit he's wrong in other aspects of his life, like something like pornography that is so attached to shame and such a yucky thing to even talk about with so many people, it's like, good luck, they'll continue in the shadows forever if that's their MO. But yeah, I also think it's hard to talk about because most people don't want to talk about it until it becomes a problem. And so I think if you tackle these conversations early and you do it with love, not with accusation and not with judgment, then it's a whole different approach and different conversation, and it doesn't need to be so dramatic. Like, and there were some other questions about pornography, and I don't want to get into a whole thing about it because it almost is beyond the purview of what I can even speak on. And it's such a nuanced conversation. I'd like to maybe have it with more of an expert, whether that's, an expert on addiction or, someone in recovery that's had their own experiences. But yeah, I think if there's someone in your life that is struggling with this addiction, you have a lot of choices, but I think the only appropriate approach is done with love and without judgment. And maybe your retort is that, because of this addiction, they've done this and this and this, and so it's reprehensible behavior, and it's caused this, and it's dovetailed into this other addiction and this other lustful behavior, and maybe that's the case, but it still needs, if it's somebody you love and care about, it still needs to be approached with love and tenderness and without judgment. But like I said, if you wait until this is a full-blown addiction and this is a full-blown problem, then this conversation is going to be brutal because it sounds like it's the first time you've ever talked about it. And so I think in an ideal relationship with anyone, with a son and a mother, with boyfriend and girlfriend, husband and wife, like, nothing should be off the table. Like, there shouldn't be areas of conversation that one or both parties have decided is not to be touched, and that's hard, but I think it actually ends up eliminating the really hard conversations and the really hard scenarios that most people want to avoid anyway. How to get over someone you thought was your soulmate. I'll tell you what, I've attempted to do this several times in my life. probably really specifically twice. And it's one of the, if not the hardest thing I've ever done, trying to get over someone you thought was your soulmate. And even if you thought that for a couple weeks, because you don't think that lightly. People talk about love at first sight, but they usually say that after the fact. They say that, 3 years later when they got married, they decided it was love at first sight. But you don't casually decide that someone might be your soulmate. Like, that's a real serious thought. And so whether it was there for a couple weeks or 2 years, to have that vanish and dissipate is heartrending. And how to get over that? It's like, I don't know, man. How do you get over something that completely breaks your heart? I think the only truth in that is time, and sometimes with time it's realizing that maybe that person wasn't your soulmate, or maybe they could have been your soulmate, but your soulmate would never break up with you. Your true and living soulmate would never let you go. And so, yeah, I think coming to terms with that can be really helpful, and that's not easy. That's a hard look in the mirror to think, okay, I thought this person was my soulmate, but they let me go pretty darn easily. There was no fight. There was no, they kind of walked away as if it was a pretty easy thing to do. Is that characteristic of a soulmate? I don't think so. So I think sometimes that realization can help, but certainly time for myself has been the best healer. And again, I'll speak for myself. And I've had people say that I've put women on pedestals, but I don't think that's the case. I think I've just been honest that this girl that broke my heart was wonderful, is wonderful. Just because they don't want to be with me, didn't choose me, didn't find me to be the best option for them, doesn't make them any less wonderful. Might make them less of a soulmate, might make them less compatible than I actually thought, but there's no use in denigrating them, And, I think it's a separate conversation if that girl mistreated you or cheated on you or did something, reprehensible. Then, yeah, you don't need to shower them with compliments and talk about how wonderful they were. And maybe they were for a stint. But yeah, I think when you're trying to heal your heart and trying to move on from something really serious, bitterness and resentment is not the answer, even though it feels like that's what will help you move on, to tell the narrative that this person sucks and is not worthy of your love, Sometimes that's true, but for me, it just hasn't been the case. The girls that have broken my heart pretty deeply. They just, for whatever reason, the reasons I'll never truly know, wanted to be with somebody else more than they wanted to be with me, and didn't see the future together that we saw. And that's that's hard to stomach, but yeah, I don't envy anyone that's trying to get over somebody that they had that with, but and I don't even know how helpful it is to hear this, because when you're really going through it, you're like, okay, say what you want. I'm in crisis. I'm in pain. But I do know that it gets better with time, and you have to be really loving with yourself, and give yourself however much time it takes. And don't be mad or embarrassed or sad that it's taken longer than you thought, or longer than you think it should take. Just feel it, and feel it fully. And, I don't like when people say, feel it or whatever, but then move on, because moving on is not an easy thing to do. It's partly a decision, but sometimes you're like, dude, I'm trying to move on, but I keep thinking about them. I keep sort of emotionally relapsing, I keep looking at pictures on my phone. I keep hearing songs and thinking about them. And, I drive past a park and I see a bench that we used to sit on, and we saw the sunset, and we kissed, and we did this. Like, I'm trying to move on, but that's happening to me, And so I think you have to give yourself grace, and you move on as you can. Okay, this next question, it's funny that it fell in this order, but it's essentially the same question as before, but I want to quickly touch it because it's a little bit different. He says, actually, I have no idea if this is a he or a she. A little bit of pixie dust is a username. Who knows? How do you get over your partner of 5.5 years telling you they never saw a future with you? It's kind of the same thing, right? You thought that person was your soulmate. They apparently didn't. Okay. How do you reconcile that? I think it's very difficult, especially after you've been together for that long. But I think you have to realize if a person has been with you for 5.5 years and then tells you they never saw a future with you, that person is a psychopath. That person has been lying to you and themselves for half a decade. Like, that's, malevolent behavior. So you can take some solace in knowing that that's not normal. You don't want to be with somebody that's capable of that level of mendacious action, So, but I'll tell you what, that can mess people up when they've encountered that sort of darkness and that sort of manipulative behavior. Because to me, and my first thought is, I don't really believe that. They're just saying that to try and hurt you and make it easier for themselves to walk away. But if it is true, then that person is an unstable human you don't want to be with, right? And so, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. Understand either they have some serious, deep-seated issues and they let something go on for half a decade that they didn't really see a future in. Okay, either they're a liar or they're an idiot. They're wasting their own time. Like, they're maybe saying this to hurt you, but they've wasted their own time as well. So, they're not exactly coming out of this the victor. So, but it's hard when you've encountered something like that. You feel like the last 5.5 years have been a waste. But I think anytime a relationship ends, even when it's ugly, it's helpful to go back and look at the good, look at what you learned about yourself, and take it into the next relationship. Say, okay, this next one, the last thing I want to do is end up with somebody that isn't fully in, that doesn't see a future with me. So I'm going to figure that out from the jump. And if I feel any sort of dissonance, if I feel any sort of like unwillingness to talk about the future or what they want from me, I'm gone. That's what you have to do. Let's see. How do you keep going on when it seems like everything is falling apart around you? I think you have to realize that when you're going through something, everything else gets a little bit magnified. And so, when you're depressed, everything is a little bit harder. Everything else is a little bit more personal, and you're just way more affected by negative emotion, right? So I think it's helpful to take a step back and realize, is everything falling apart? Or am I just hypersensitive right now because 3 things in my life are falling apart? And maybe those 3 things are monumental. And so you're like, well, okay, it's not everything, but it's all the important things. My marriage is falling apart. My health is bad. Lost my job. Like, what else is there? But I think you have to, if everything's falling apart, okay, what are your options? Like, you have to start rebuilding somewhere, right? And so if your marriage is falling apart and you lost your job and your health is bad, like, you can't fix all of those at one time, right? You have to decide what's in your control, what is fixable right now, what is conquerable right now. And maybe it's a lot of little things that maybe can help you get back in the job market, can maybe help improve your health. Maybe it's, well, my health has been going downhill for a while, but now that I'm realizing I have some control, I can start eating better. I can start going to the gym. I can start actually taking my medication, Maybe my marriage has gone to hell, but I can maybe start to work on myself and realize part of the reason it went to hell was because of me. So maybe I need to get my buns into therapy. Maybe I need to take some time off and grieve this ending, like, it's tough when a few things in your life start to collapse. It feels like it might as well be everything, but know that it's not everything. There's good in your life. There's good to be found, but you can't rebuild it all at once. You have to go. And people say, it's brick by brick. Rome wasn't built in a day. And it's like, yeah, but these cliches are actually really true. But sometimes, it's one brick at a time, right? But sometimes you have to go on a journey to freaking find the brick. And you get to the brick and it's heavy as hell and you can't even pick it up. And you finally pick it up and then you drop it. And you still have miles to go to get it to the place where the other bricks are so you can start to assemble something. Sometimes that's the reality of the task. And it's not as simple as, well, one brick at a time. It's a freaking journey and a half to just get to your brick. And maybe you get there and the brick is buried. That's reality. That's the crucible of life. And so, but what other options do you have? You're all in on life. You're here. So go get your damn brick. If it's buried, unbury it. If it's too heavy, get some help. If you can't get some help, find some help. If you can't find some help, keep looking. These are your only options. And so I think sometimes we get incredibly overwhelmed by what we have to do to make our life better and rebuilt and somehow sound after it's fallen apart. But you have to just search for little wins and little ways of finding those bricks. Do you think we can only love that was just worded weird. Do you think we can only truly love one person in our life? I don't think so. I don't think there's a set number. I think it's unlikely you're going to truly love 12 people in your life, but I think it just depends. I think the romantic vision that most people have is that you have one true love, but sometimes you have two. Sometimes you have three, and some people have zero, And so if you have one, if you've had a couple, and maybe you've had a few failed relationships, but you truly felt love in those, like, I know that's hard, but you're kind of one of the lucky ones, to have found love 3 times. A lot of people never find it, or they find it and then they lose it. So, be grateful for what you have in any capacity. But I don't believe that we all have one shot at love, and if you screw up, you're toast. I don't believe that. What's something you know a lot about, not related to what you do for a living? Let's see. I know a decent amount about geography. I love just knowing things about countries and places and cities and populations and capitals, and part of that is connected to my interest in history. I was a history major, and part of that is connected to my interest in traveling, and my obsession with reading Wikipedia articles. But I'm trying to think of like the handful of things in life that I truly know the most about, even if I'm not, necessarily an expert. I probably know the most about basketball. I've loved basketball since I was a little kid, so my knowledge of basketball history, the NBA, basketball rules, like, I've coached, I've reffed, I've played. I know a lot about it, and there's certainly lots of people that know more than me, but that's definitely one of the areas. Trying to think what else. I know a whole lot about my favorite author. His name's David Foster Wallace, and I've referenced him a bunch on the podcast and read some of his quotes and talked about some of his books, but I've just read everything he's ever written, every essay, every unpublished piece, I read his doctoral thesis that was published. I've read lots of biographies and critical essays about his work, and online articles about his books and reviews on his books, and I've scoured the internet trying to get, because he's dead, and so I don't get any more, and he's not as famous or popular as some classic authors that you could read books about them till the end of time, because people will continue to write about Shakespeare and continue to write about Hemingway and some of these immortal names, but he's not quite on that echelon, so there's not as much out there, and like I said, there are certainly people that are truly David Foster Wallace scholars and experts and know way more than I do, but that's probably a top 5 thing that I am interested in and know about. Anytime somebody gets interested in him and reads one of his books or a couple of his books, I love talking to them because I can tell them I can give him so much insight, and I know so much about his personal life and his academic life and his writing life, and so it kind of adds to the experience of reading his work. Do you ever struggle with wondering if any of it is true or real? Meaning God and Christian doctrine. It's funny. I was having this conversation with my mom 2 nights ago, and listen, your brain does a lot of funny things that are a little bit inexplicable, and doubt and hope and creativity and fantasy and romance, like things just come into your brain, and it's kind of up to you as to if you're going to let things hang out and simmer there. And so of course I've had my doubts and my moments of wondering. I actually wonder a lot about things, but I've never truly had doubts that I've considered very seriously when it comes to God and my faith. And I count myself lucky. I think faith has been one of the gifts that has been given to me. And there are other spiritual gifts that I think I struggle with and I'm not especially good at. And sometimes that bugs me and I'm insecure about that. But yeah, I've just always had faith, and I've always believed what I believe. And it's funny, sometimes people will ask me if I'm still a member of my church or if I'm still active in my community, and I tell people, I'm a lifer. I'm not going anywhere. And that doesn't mean that I've bought into some system and I'm just a sheep and I'm just like blindly following other people. This is just what I believe in, and it's what I've always believed in. And so if that changes, it changes, but I don't think it will, because I know myself really well, and I know what I think, and I know what I believe, and I know what I've felt. So, but I don't fault anyone for struggling with their belief, because it's tricky. And especially when you're going through things, really serious things, it's hard to not come out spiritually unscathed. And so I for sure understand that. Again, this is very connected to a previous question. Please provide advice for properly grieving a breakup. What helped you? Yeah, I think grieving is the operative word. I think sometimes we're trying to get over a breakup, but we don't really grieve it, And you don't need to be overly dramatic and call it a death, but your relationship sure as hell died, So I think it's okay to grieve it, and you don't throw a funeral for a breakup, although maybe it would be helpful, but I think, yeah, you really feel it, and you go listen to your sad songs, and you write about it, and you tell your friends about it, and you tell your family about it, and you vent, and you cry, and you cry with other people that you trust and you feel safe with. Let them see your pain. Don't hide your pain. You don't need to, film yourself crying and throw it on Instagram, but feel your pain and give yourself a break, and forgive yourself for feeling depressed and for not feeling productive and not doing anything and wanting to be in bed all day and not wanting to eat, and for wanting to block this person on Instagram so you can get work done. Give yourself some grace, because it is a really, really hard thing to do. And I think once you start to do that, and once you start to just love yourself during the breakup and be like, you know what, I'm really sad. I'm in a bad way. I'm in a funk, but I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to find joy in other areas of life, and I'm trying to find purpose in other things, and trying to not blame the entire opposite sex as if they are the entire problem and reason for my unhappiness. you know um, just be honest with yourself. And yeah, like, it's been, for myself, it's been like a year and a half since my last serious breakup, and my heart is still, I would say my heart is still a little tender, but I'm a lot more over this person than I was, you know 6 months ago, certainly a year ago. And I couldn't really, in the first couple weeks and months even, I couldn't really visualize the state I'm currently in. I couldn't see how I could get out of it, even though I knew I would. Intellectually, I'd gotten over people before. I'd moved on from heartbreak before. I knew I could do it again, but this one felt different. This one was worse. This one hurt me more. Um, but here I am, heart still tender, still think about her sometimes, maybe more than I should, but who's keeping track of that? Who's policing that? I don't know. But I've tried to do things to not set myself back. When I'm thinking about her, I try not to have that take over my night. I try to, think about, some memories that maybe make me a little sad, and be like, yeah, that was really awesome. I'm glad we had that moment, and let's not think about it for the rest of the evening. Let's not escape and go, do something to numb my brain, but let's not fixate on it. So yeah, I'm grateful that I'm to that place, but it took me a while, and I didn't even date this girl for very long. But the heart will do things that you were not prepared for. So give yourself some grace. I shouldn't have even included this question just because it's so similar, but I'll try to touch on it real briefly. How to completely let go of someone who let you go. I think don't become obsessed with, having them completely let go. Like, that person might always be with you a little bit. There might always be a little bit of pain. Even when you fully move on, you're out of love with that person, you're in love with someone new, you remarry, whatever, like, still there might come a day where that, you hear their name, you see an old photo, and it kind of does something to you. But it doesn't affect your day anymore. It doesn't send you down a spiral anymore, but it kind of, gives you a little uneasy feeling for half a second, or maybe it gets to a point where all it is good memories, but that that person is still with you a little bit. And I think the ones that you kind of never think about again, like, I don't know how special that love ever was if you can completely erase them from your life, and you can fully move on and not really think about someone anymore. But yeah, just maybe don't be obsessed with, I need to completely let them go. Like, just try to let them go and move on. And whatever sneaks up and attacks you every once in a while, like, that's just life. That's how the heart works. How do you trust any human at all if every person that said they loved you has hurt or left you? I'm going to attempt to address this. I will say I don't feel like people have betrayed me or abandoned me in my life. I've, of course, like I've mentioned, have had some hurt and some heartbreak of my own, and have had people leave me, but it hasn't been everybody. I've done some leaving myself. I've done some hurting myself, and I'm not proud of it, but that's what happens. And so I don't know. For me, trust is not the issue, and maybe this person that's asking their trust has been betrayed more than mine, but I don't know. I think when you let someone in, you're kind of surrendering to the fact that this person can hurt you, because if they can't hurt you, you don't really care about them. And so, finding trust again after you've lost trust for everyone is really difficult. I'm sure for me, I haven't lost trust in humanity or in the opposite sex, or even the people that hurt me, because they didn't do it, with malice. They didn't do it behind my back. It wasn't that sort of thing. It wasn't vicious. And so it's funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they were kind of asking this same question, and I basically said, I'm sorry for all you've been through, but this next person you might meet, I know for you it feels like a pattern that you can't escape, but this next person you meet has nothing to do with these people that have hurt you. They have absolutely nothing to do with that. And maybe you think because they're a guy, it's all lumped together because guys are untrustable, or the opposite. Maybe you can't trust women anymore, or you can't trust people. You've been betrayed by everyone right and left your whole life. But these new people you let in, you don't want to be stupid and foolish and let somebody hurt you needlessly or, malevolently. But these people have nothing to do with your previous hurt. And hopefully they love you enough to accept your previous hurt and whatever emotional baggage comes with that. And, but that's, it's just, it's correlation, not causation. It feels like every person that comes into your life does something to lose your trust, but maybe you've been letting in people that have bad behavior, and you've let that behavior slide because you don't want to be alone. And so, and I don't know this person's situation, but I think it is important to ask yourself some of these questions. Okay, this next one, I got a lot of people in my DMs that are going through it. They are hurting. And like I said, I hope people can feel a little bit less alone. I don't know that anything I say is going to magically solve their problems or make them feel better, but hopefully it can give some perspective and some peace maybe. But this person says, how do you get over an ex when they are a coworker and they moved on in 1 week with another coworker and we were together for 2.5 years? Oh, that's brutal. It's just brutal. Like, there's no two ways about it. It's absolutely brutal. I'll tell you, the last girl that I was with, I thought our breakup was tragic. I thought it, was something the Greeks would write about, and there'd be death in a play that was our story. There would be death, and she told me that she wasn't ready to date anyone, and in about a week, maybe it was 2 weeks, maybe it was 3, she was dating somebody again, and she went to the same church as I did, And so it wasn't quite a coworker, didn't see her every day with him, but, you know, and she would bring him to church. And so I saw them once a week, and it killed me. And I really contemplated going to a different church, um, same denomination, but a different location. But for some reason I didn't. Maybe I was a glutton for for just the pain. Maybe I wanted to see her so she could see me and remember how great I was, and wanted to be there when she jettisoned this guy. But um, it was just pain. It was just horrible, and I saw them together every week, and I wanted to die. I really had a hard time with it, but luckily it only lasted a few months, and then she moved or whatever. But yeah, there's almost nothing worse than seeing somebody that hurt you, left you with a shattered heart, just instantly moved on with somebody, and it's kind of rubbed in your face. And so, my advice would be to get another job. I'm being a little bit serious. Like, it's tough because you don't want to do something so drastic that it shows that person that they kind of won and that they have full dominion over your heart. But you also have to look out for yourself. And so I would just ask yourself, like, can I handle this long term, or is this really bad for my mental health? Like, is it realistic for me to transfer or go work somewhere else or work from home or whatever? And if not, if this is like your dream job or the perfect situation and there's just no way around it, um, I, I think it's going to be hard for a while, but you maybe have to have a conversation with your ex, and maybe get some of the resentment out, maybe get some unresolved questions out, and just say, hey, like, maybe draw some boundaries, maybe say, hey, listen, like, I respect your decision, we're not together anymore, that's okay, it hurts me, but that's okay, but out of respect for me and for what we had, can you not, like, be touchy and kissy with them at work? It's killing me. Can you do me that small kindness? Um, and I don't know, maybe your ex is a snake and they say, I don't care, deal with it. But I think it's worth having that conversation. And if there's boundaries you need drawn to get through the day, then I think having that conversation will be hard, but it'll be way harder to not have it. Um, but hey, man, my heart bleeds for you. That is a violent situation you found yourself in. Next question. Do you believe in divine timing? How do you practice surrender to it? I do, but I won't pretend to understand it. Um, I do try it. That's the perfect word. I do try to surrender my timeline and my desires to the Lord's, to that divine timing. But it can be frustrating because, you know, God doesn't share his Google Calendar with me. And so I'm out here just trying to figure it out myself. But for me, being closer to God helps me understand his timing a little bit better. When I'm distant, it all seems random and it all seems even hurtful. But yeah, I think you learn how to surrender in general, and that's how you learn to surrender to divine time or the Lord's will, or um, really anything. You just learn how to surrender and learn that life actually isn't all about you, and life actually, this beautiful little planet we're on, doesn't actually revolve around you, that there are bigger pictures, that there are bigger things at work, but that you're here and you're part of something beautiful, but it's not actually entirely about you. It's a hard truth. Have you ever regretted loving someone that doesn't feel the same for you? No. Why regret love? Why regret trying? Why regret feeling something that you thought was unfeelable, that you thought was impossible? Just because it ended? No, I'm not regretting that. I'll regret some poor financial decisions. I'll regret, some decisions I made as a youth, some things I've participated in. I will not regret love. And I will not regret attempted love either. Do you have any advice for finding emotional, mature / stable / secure men, coming from someone that is newly divorced? Yeah, just realize that that's what's important to you now. And maybe you had to go through that divorce to realize that these things are more important to you than whatever, financial stability or a guy's ability to charm, his sense of humor, his wit, and those things are great and important too, but maybe you've found that emotional maturity and stability and security is what you need from a guy. And so, it's not like, it's funny, sometimes I'll see on dating apps like looking for an emotionally mature guy, and it's like that's not gonna weed out any emotionally immature guys. No guy's gonna read that and be like, oh shoot, I'm emotionally immature, I guess I'll swipe away. Like, either he doesn't realize he's emotionally immature, or he's so emotionally immature that he's fine with it and willing to try and hide that fact from you. So trying to weed it out by saying it on a dating app that that's your preference, or even on a first date, like asking a guy if he's emotionally stable. Like, I see where you're coming from, but it's not the right approach. Like, you have to feel it and you have to see it. You have to see the evidence of it. And so, yeah, just realize that those are now your pillars. Those are the pillars of dating for you have changed, and you now don't want these things, you require them. And so don't let other things hypnotize you and, take more precedent than the things that really matter, the pillars. For me, my pillars are, I've talked about these before. They are personality, physical attraction / intimacy, spirituality, intellect, and emotional well-being. This number 5 covers these things, emotional maturity, stability, emotional security. So these are my 5 pillars. Problem is, I can get hypnotized if, number 2, attraction, if this is too high, not too high, but if it's really freaking high, I can start to really lose sight of, if her emotional stability is not great, oh man, I can look the other direction. I sure can. But I have to remember these are my pillars. So if one of them falls, the whole house falls down. And so figure out what your pillars are. I think everyone should have these 5 pillars. And I know women often have a couple more, but yeah, just don't settle for less than that. You can settle in other areas. He can make $80K a year and not 200. He can have good style, not great style. But don't settle in emotional wellness. What are your 3 highlights from the year? asked from the very person who I've mentioned many times that has broken my heart most recently. But bless her heart for wanting to know what I'm up to, you know? I would say my 3 highlights from the year would be, 1, having my heart a little bit mended in some capacity. In 2024, by the end of 2024, that is, my heart is way less broken than it was at the beginning of 2024. And for that, I'm grateful. And I consider a highlight. So the fact that the girl who asked this question was the breaker of that heart is deeply ironic, and I realize that. But that's, that's the way these things go. Number 2, I would say a highlight is just the success of the podcast. I've been doing it for over 5 years now. Started in November of 2019, but honestly, I always took it seriously, but I didn't really go into it full time and with all my resources until this year, really. And it's shown to be very, that's why we've started to have some success, and it's been awesome, and I've been so grateful and even overwhelmed with the love I've received on a daily basis from listeners and dare I say fans? I don't know. Am I big enough to have fans? I don't know. That word sounds gross to me, but that's probably what they are. And 3rd, I would say this year, and maybe it's really started the previous year, so I don't know, but my dad's health has improved drastically. He's changed his diet and he started working out every day, and he's back. There was a lot of years where he was in a lot of pain, and he's still in a lot of pain from a lot of different injuries and complications and stomach issues, and I don't want to tell his whole story, but some light has returned, and I've seen it, and it's been so awesome, and I'm just so grateful that he's in a better spot. And I played in a pickleball tournament with him this weekend, for goodness sake. We got 3rd place, much to my chagrin, but it was his second tournament ever, my first tournament ever, our first tournament together. So 3rd place is pretty good, honestly, but we should have got second. We probably weren't going to get first, but we should have got second. So those are my highlights, and there's been a lot of other amazing things that have happened to me this year, but I think those probably take the cake. Maybe my nephew Declan being born. He's 6-7 months now, and he's just, he's a perfect baby. So that's also a highlight. Okay, we're wrapping up, guys. I promise you, we're at the tail end here. How have you learned to navigate the holidays when you're single? I'll tell you what, I've become pretty expert at this. And I'll tell you what, when you're the only sibling that's not married, you tend to get more gifts at Christmas. I'm telling you, there are some silver linings, but I don't know, the holidays can be hard. For me, it kind of just depends on how my heart is going into the holidays. If I'm going through heartbreak and, I'm going back to my small hometown and I'm with a bunch of cousins and siblings and everyone else is married but me, that can be really hard. Especially, a lot of times the holidays that's when you see people that you only see once a year or so. So they want to know how you're doing, and they want to know, are you dating anybody? And depending on the timing, those questions can be really violent, So So yeah, like this Christmas, I think I'll be okay. There'll be moments where I'm just, with my sister and her kids and her husband and my parents. And I just kind of feel like the lone wolf, you know, and that can be hard, but I just try not to make it all about me. Like, let me be the best uncle I can during that time. Let me be a good son, like Christmas, it always feels like it's for the kids, but as you grow up, like, let's have it be a little bit more about the parents. Let's have it be more about my siblings, and it just doesn't need to be all about me, but it sure can be tough. And I have some really sad Christmas songs on this playlist that I like. And so um, yeah, if you're missing someone and you're just thinking about how the holidays would be better if they were with you, it can be really hard. But just being single in general, like, I don't know that Christmas is any harder than just some weekend with my family, because just feeling like you're the only single one, it can be lonely. But just because there's snow on the ground doesn't make it necessarily more difficult. Question from the same person: do you hear God audibly, or does He speak to you more through people/experiences? I don't know that I've ever heard an audible voice of God. Maybe I have, but if I have, it's been so subtle and so small that it was indistinguishable from my own thoughts, or it happened so quickly that I wasn't sure what to make of it. But I think for the most part, yeah, God speaks through me. He speaks to me through music, through beautiful art, through friends, through family, through sunsets, through natural beauty. Like, there's a lot of things. Um, I know there's a lot of people I'm close to that don't even believe in God, but that's just how I make sense of the world and make sense of my feelings and make sense of my purpose. And so that brings me joy. And I don't really mind if someone disagrees or even thinks it's foolish. That's my experience. That's my truth, right? Um, yeah. What is a memory that holds an immense amount of joy for you? That's such a good question. I should have thought about this more. People talk a lot about core memories. You'll do something fun and people will be like, oh, that was a core memory for me. And I don't know. I don't know if there's ultimately a big difference between a core memory and just a good memory that sticks with you. And maybe that's the definition. I don't know. But I feel lucky that a lot of them are running through my brain. There's a lot of moments. And I think as many like fun things as I've done in my life, it's the core memories, the things that stick out to me are not necessarily like the day you saw the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's the fact that I was in Pisa with Nick and Ben, and we were experiencing Europe together for the first time, and we were laughing and we were taking pictures and we were just three friends together. That's the memory. I have the photos and everything, and the tower was cool, and I'm a history buff, and so I love all that stuff. But this is such a random example because Pisa is probably like my 30th favorite place in Europe. It was cool, um, but yeah, I've done a lot of cool things and seen a lot of beautiful places. But to me, the most important memories are just with people, and it's usually just laughing and sharing joy. When you're with somebody you really love, whether it's a romantic love or just a friendship or a family member, it's so beautiful to just share joy, right? When you really love someone, when you're really close with somebody, you want to show them a show that you love because you love it, right? You want to love the same things. You want to share in joy. You want to bathe in this river of joy together. And to me, what you're doing is almost secondary. A lot of times you want to come up with something to do so you're not just sitting around looking at your phone being bored, but ultimately it doesn't really matter what you do if you're with the right people. And I know that's not a very specific answer, but memory with immense amount of joy. Probably, a trip that I've made. I love traveling, but it's who you travel with. Sometimes you go someplace awesome, but people are complaining and people are just not that fun to be around, right? But yeah, I went on a trip to Hawaii with my 2 unmarried sisters at the time and my parents when I was 21. My dad said no cell phones until we get back to the hotel at night. So we were just there, hanging out on the beach, eating exotic fruit, you know, doing weird, funny things that siblings do, annoying each other, jumping up and down, just being together. That's a memory that elicits immense joy from me. Last question. What is a lesson you have learned that has changed how you live and how you view life? I had an experience, I served an LDS mission for my church when I was 19. Lived in Brazil for 2 years, and I could talk about that experience all day, but it was really hard. Yeah, I had to learn Portuguese. I had to be away from my family and friends, and the mission rules and regulations were tighter than they are these days. And but I loved it. I really did. Like, I loved teaching. I loved meeting new people. I loved learning a new language. I loved it, but I had a very difficult. They call them companions. That it's just you and a homie, and you're walking around the streets together all day, every day, and you're usually together for at least 6 weeks. Sometimes, you're together for months and months. Anyways, I was with this dude, and we were just beefing a little bit. Like, nothing serious, but we just viewed the world differently and just were not getting along very well. And it was just me and him in this house, and we got into some little disagreement about something really small. I don't even fully remember what it was. I think I might remember, but I'm not confident. And he didn't talk to me for 3 days. And we kept going to our appointments, kept teaching people. I kept teaching people. He remained silent. And then at the end of this 3rd day, I had had enough. I'm not someone that's very easily moved to anger or rage, but I had had enough. And I tried talking to him. He wasn't budging. So I just fell to my knees and was like, God, we can't do this anymore. Something's got to give. And it's funny, I say that, but I was on my knees for probably 15. It felt like I was there for a half hour. Might have been 3 minutes. I was just on my knees, knowing I needed to talk to God about this and find a resolution, but I couldn't speak because I was filled with rage because this was so infuriating. And I'd never had somebody do this to me before, right? And I finally started uttering a few words, and then homeboy taps me on the shoulder and just gives me a hug and says he's sorry. And I don't know, it felt like this watershed moment in my life where I realized how unimportant it was to be right. He extended an olive branch, didn't even like go into why he was sorry or how he had been an idiot, how dismissive he had been. He just said, "I'm sorry," and gave me a hug. And we were good. We were good from then on. And when I was transferred to a new area, he wept. And, it's not like to this day we're best friends and we became blood brothers, but we did form a bond and we became closer. And that little incident, I don't know, I learned about forgiveness, and I learned how it would have been so easy for me to be like, okay, dude, like, thanks for apologizing, but what was your problem? But I don't know, in that moment I realized that wasn't necessary. He had done, I knew it took a lot for him to extend that olive branch and to apologize and admit that he was wrong. And, yeah, I didn't need any more. And I think from then on, I've been way less concerned about being right and way more concerned about having peace and having harmony in my relationships. Because there'll be things I'll be right about, things I'll be wrong about, but I don't want to be obsessed with being right and let that desire to be correct in all things cloud my judgment and cloud my ability to mend relationships and add love when there's some hurt there, So yeah, I think that was actually a big lesson for me and a big moment in my life. I wanted to talk about one more thing I saw on Instagram the other day. It was this series of images, started with a heart and ended with a stone. And with each passing image, the heart started to look more like a stone. And below it, it just said, pain changes people. And it made me think, like, where's the state of my heart? Is it closer to a stone or closer to a fully anatomically correct heart? Because I don't want to have my heart be a stone. And I know I've been hurt and I've gone through things, and there are things that have made me jaded and cynical and bitter. But I don't want to have a stone heart. I want to have a soft heart. I want to have a heart that's instantly ready to love. And you don't need to climb a wall to get to it. I want it to be available and ready. And so that image had a profound effect on me, honestly. And it made me kind of, think back on the name of the podcast of Stone and Clay. And, I want my heart to be more like clay. I don't want it to be stone. And so yeah, I would suggest, I would advise people to, have some inventory with yourself. Ask yourself, what is the state of your heart? How is it? Where is it? What shape is it? Where is it going? Is it molding into something sinister? Anyways, I love you guys. Gosh, I really do. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to share my thoughts and to share my life with you guys. So I really appreciate you listening, and I hope when an episode really moves you, you feel likewise moved to share it with somebody else. And it always means a lot when it's reposted or people comment on social media, but what would really mean the most to me is if you shared it with somebody you felt like really needed it. So anyways, episode 110 of Stone and Clay. This is your boy. We'll see you later. Also, isn't this hat dope? Art? Need I say more? Art.